Hi, everybody. Welcome to this Social Enterprise Network. Thank you ever so much for joining us on what is hopefully a lovely day. So our Social Enterprise Network is to help support social businesses all across Wales, and really grateful to you for joining us today. It's to help you network, meet other people, and we put these on also to share ideas and share information we think is going to help the sector to help you grow and become sustainable. Um, Social Business Wales is actually a consortium itself, so that's different organisations working together to provide this support. There's Compass, where I work, and my colleague Dave, who's a business consultant, he's also part of Compass. And then we've got other organisations, Development Trusts, Associated Wales, Social Firms Wales, Unlimited, and WCVA, and the programme's funded by Welsh Government. So thank you again for joining us. And we have a couple of speakers today that are really going to help us understand this subject. We want to discuss it all around procurement because there's some changes coming in to Wales. We have done sessions on procurement before, and I will share some information with you with a link to those if you want to go back over it. But today we're going to learn a little bit about some changes that are coming in that will affect Wales and hopefully present opportunities for social businesses that help you consider, if you're not already working in this space, this additional income stream that could be more sustainable for you. So some of you here today are already working with public sector contracts, and that's great, and we hope you'll share your experience. And for some of you, it'll be new, something you're considering, or maybe you're supporting social enterprises. So hopefully it will be great for you to learn, about those opportunities coming in and from others in the room already. So we really welcome everybody's experience and questions today. And you're welcome to sort of ask them when we get to time for questions, or pop your questions in the chat as we discuss. So as I said, we do these events every so often, and the way we share information afterwards, we put the presentations on a Padlet. So we're going to try and pop in the chat there a link to the Padlet for today, and that will have, it might not have it already, but it will have all the presentations on. And also social businesses, where I've been able to get your website link, I've popped that in there, and you can see people who've attended previously as well. So it's a useful place for you to go to find information and any other links that are relevant today. So I mentioned previous sessions on this. I've popped those links in there, and at the end I'll recap what those were. So I think Dave's going to try and pop the link in the chat for you as well. So as I said, we've got a couple of really good speakers as well. So Carl from Welsh Government, I think he's here now. Yeah, I can see you, Carl.
Yeah.
Carl is going to share some information about these two new major changes and how they'll affect businesses in Wales and the opportunities for you. And then Merthyr Tydfil Institute for the Blind. I'm really glad that they've been able to come along today. And they're going to share with us how they approach procurement, how that's worked for them. So thank you. We've got Richard and Petra here from there. Thank you so much for joining us. And then before we go ahead with that, just a really quick news section for anyone who wanted to share any information. So I don't think Derry's here today, but Derry in Carmarthenshire, he works for an organisation called Kegin Headin. So I'll pop a link in later. But I think he's I don't know if you've heard of those BBC Food and Farming Awards. He's applying for that. Obviously, it'd be nice for himself, but it's mainly for recognition for his project. So I'll put a link in for that later if anyone has the time to go and wants to vote for him. They're like a community kitchen. And then I think Chris from Koala, you wanted to just really quickly mention your new service that you'd like to promote.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. Morning, everybody. So my name is Chris from Koala Wellbeing. I also have Koala Counselling as well. The business is very recent. I set up Koala Counselling in 2022, and Koala being 2023, which was last year. And Koala Wellbeing kind of focuses on work with businesses and organisations. And essentially, that work is based on the EI, otherwise known as emotional intelligence. And very often when I talk about emotional intelligence, people glaze over or they head for the closest door. So what I'm going to try and do is explain emotional intelligence in 30 seconds, if that's okay. So first of all, it's a psychology, sometimes called the business psychology, because that's where it's predominantly used. The reason it's a business psychology is that unlike a lot of the other what you might call mainstream psychologies that you might have heard of, CBT, REBT, NLP, DBT, there's a whole host of them. What emotional intelligence does is it kind of takes a lot from those other psychologies. But the difference is it's easy to learn, it's easy to understand, it's simple to apply and to put into effect. And as a result of that, you get some fairly quick results from it as well. It's also very versatile and very flexible as well. So it can be used in any area of business or any organizations with individuals or with groups as well. And just recently, we finalized a number of very short modular-based courses, which I don't know whether anybody's interested in. I mean, I'm not sure what the connection is with this course today, in fact. One of the courses is called Protecting Your Wellbeing Under Pressure, and it's designed to help individuals and teams and groups of individuals working within organizations deal with things like demands and targets and challenges and work pressures and changes and whatever qualifies as kind of as a difficult situation at that time. So that's called Protecting Your Wellbeing Under Pressure. The second course that we've developed is called Transforming Anxiety into Motivation. And I think a lot of us probably know the feeling of anxiety, but it's one of those things that it doesn't necessarily have to impede us in terms of what we're doing. And so having the skills, and it is a skill, having the skills and the knowledge simply to be able to understand what anxiety is and how it affects us adversely, and then to kind of pivot that, to change the dynamic on that, and to change it into motivation that works for us rather than against us is kind of what that course is all about. So that's called Transforming Anxiety into Motivation. And then the
Okay,
third
Chris,
course,
sorry,
sorry,
we
is that enough?
probably have to just stop it there just because of
Of
time.
course.
But if
Yeah,
you want to
sure.
put a link in the chat to who you're aiming this at, if it's third sector businesses and
Absolutely.
a link to it, that'd be fantastic. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
If anyone else has got any news they want to announce, you can jump in now, or you can pop that in the chat as well. If not, then I'm going to hand over to Carl, just so we can get everything on the agenda that we've got today, because we've got a bit of a packed hour. Okay. All right then. So I can't see the chat myself, just the way it's set up. So I will if you otherwise any questions for Carl, I think he'll probably take them at the end of his session. Okay. So
Lovely.
Carl,
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. So can you hear me first of all?
yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
You can hear me. That's perfect. Okay. So thank you first of all for the kind invitation to come and speak to you all this morning. I'm really grateful to Elizabeth for giving me the opportunity. So my name's Carl, and I am Welsh Government's Procurement Reform Stakeholder and Policy Lead. And I lead the team in the Welsh Government that's essentially responsible for the implementation of this weird and wonderful thing called procurement reform. And over the course of the next kind of 20 minutes or so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what procurement reform means in a Welsh context. I'm going to highlight kind of how it ties in with some other legislation in the form of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, highlight some of the kind of the main reasons and the opportunities that will be derived from changing the way that public bodies procure in Wales, and then I'm going to make some suggestions at the end in terms of kind of some of the things that I think you as social businesses should probably be starting to think about if kind of you're looking to kind of offer services and provide services to public sector organisations in Wales. But before I kind of go into my presentation, just listening to Elizabeth's introduction, I thought it would be kind of quite useful, really, just for me to kind of gauge how where to kind of set this this presentation. I thought it'd be really useful if I could just get a little bit of an understanding from you guys what you think procurement is. So if you can just spend the next kind of 30 seconds or so in the chat bar, just type in what you think procurement is. And then that will give me an idea then in terms of what it is that we what the level of understanding of procurement across your organisations. And this is the part where I'm totally silent. Sometimes I like to fill it with like a little sing song, but today's not that day. Okay. So we've got competing for business, yeah, purchasing and commissioning of goods and services, outsourcing of work activities to another organisation. We have got getting contracted work from organisations, sourcing contractual work and overseeing the contracts. So there's some really key things starting to come through there already, which shows that there's quite a good understanding of of what procurement is and kind of in fact Sinead Lewis wins the competition here. Things that help you run your operations, absolutely. So one of the things that you may determine over the next kind of 20 minutes or so is I'm really passionate about procurement, and I think procurement is the most important part of any organization, whether that's a public sector organization or actually your organizations as well, because the goods and the services that you procure done properly can really help you to achieve your strategic objectives. But one of the things that we tend to do in procurement is we tend to kind of reduce it to something that it really isn't. And one of the kind of words that was used here was around purchasing. Quite often there's a bit of a people kind of see procurement as just that, as purchasing or buying, and I do it myself. So start with a little story. I kind of use my dad as a litmus test for everything, and quite often he'll say to me, right, Cal, what do you do for a living? And I say, well, I help organizations to put contracts in place to help them, deliver services for communities, help them achieve their strategic objectives, work with stakeholders, manage risk. And he goes, yeah, but Cal, what does that mean? And I say, well, I'll go to stakeholders in the business and I'll try to determine what outcomes they're looking to achieve, what impact they're looking to have in their communities, and I help them to come up with appropriate solutions that will demonstrate social value for money, and help to achieve the four dimensions of well-being: economic, social, environmental, and cultural. And he'll go, yeah, but Carl, what does that mean? And I go, I buy things for a living. Because ultimately, what we do when we think about procurement, we think of it as buying things for a living. But actually, it's so much more than that. Good procurement is an end-to-end cycle that starts right when we have that first spark of an idea, or when we've identified that there is a need that needs to be kind of fulfilled, right the way through to some of the things that you've picked up in the chat around managing contract, managing relationships with suppliers. It's all of those kinds of things, and good strategic procurement isn't just the remit of procurement people in an organization. It takes a much wider community of people to deliver good procurement, including yourselves as social businesses. So actually good procurement is much more important, and actually some of the changes that we're seeing through procurement reform, it's not just about changing the way we buy things, it's actually about changing the approach that we take as an organization to the procurement of goods, services and works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and what I would like is just a quick thumbs up to say that you can see my slides. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so in terms of the main kind of subject of what I'm looking to talk about today is this, like I said, this weird and wonderful thing called procurement reform, and essentially we are in the process at the moment of bringing into force a new legislative regime that will affect procurement, for the way public bodies procure goods, services and works in Wales. And the three pieces of specific legislation that will affect and drive how public bodies procure are the ones that you can see on the screen. Now, without going into kind of too much detail, the Procurement Act is a UK government-led piece of legislation, which, to
Lost
put
you
it
there,
quite
Carl.
simply, essentially it covers the process. Oh, sorry, am I back?
It's all right. Yeah, there was
Can you
just
hear
one.
me?
You just
Yeah.
sort of disappeared for like 2 seconds.
Apologies.
It's
Right. So
fine.
I'll go back. So this is a UK government piece of legislation which essentially covers the process of procuring goods, services, and works. And it isn't just the kind of, the bit where we buy something. It's actually, that would relate to that much broader cycle that I mentioned earlier. So it covers, all of the kind of the pre-procurement activities that contracting authorities should be doing, including the engagement with stakeholders and with suppliers. And that's where potentially there are going to be opportunities for social businesses to help to shape the services that are being delivered by public sector organisations, and then right the way through to the contract management stage as well, and making sure that what the contracting authority wants to achieve and the outcomes that it wants to achieve are actually delivered as well. So it covers that whole kind of end-to-end procurement cycle. The second piece of legislation is a Welsh Government piece of legislation called the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Wales Act. And this is kind of a flagship piece of legislation for the Welsh Government. It does a lot of things, but there's a specific section in the legislation covering public procurement. And one of the key things that this piece of legislation does is it introduces something called a socially responsible procurement duty on contracting authorities. Now, people will then ask me, well, what is that socially responsible procurement duty? What does it mean? And I've tried to come up with a really cool, really snazzy kind of definition of socially responsible procurement. And the best thing that I can come up with is that it's just good procurement. It's nothing clever. It's nothing sexy. It is just good procurement. And when we think about what good procurement means from a contracting authority, or from kind of the buying side, it's what I said earlier. It's procurement which involves stakeholders, which understands kind of from an end user perspective, what is it that we're trying to achieve, what impacts are we looking to have, but equally, what suppliers are there in the market? How can we engage with SMEs and VCSEs and social businesses and the third sector? How can we give them the maximum opportunity to input into the delivery of these services? Because a lot of the organisations are, as you well know, are rooted in our communities and deliver, high quality, innovative services to our communities. So how can we get them involved? And that's essentially what the socially responsible procurement duty is driving. It's driving us to really think at an early stage of a procurement, how can we maximize the impact of this procurement? And that's an obligation on all public bodies that are caught by the legislation, and it applies to all of their procurements. So not just the kind of the really high value procurements, even some of those those lower 40, 50, 60,000 pound contracts. The socially responsible procurement duty will apply to that as well, but it will do so proportionately, and that's a really important point. And then the third piece of legislation, which isn't one that I'm going to really cover off today, but it's important that you're aware that it exists, is something called the Health Service Procurement Wales Act. And that applies to the procurement of certain health services by certain bodies, such as the NHS Shared Services and local authorities in Wales. So these three pieces of legislation are all essentially the kind of the procurement specific pieces of the procurement jigsaw in Wales. But as I mentioned earlier, the final piece of that jigsaw, or the glue that kind of holds everything together, is the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And as a public sector in Wales, and as kind of public bodies, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is, it's like our North Star. That is the kind of that is what drives not just our organizational kind of behavior, but the behavior of teams and individuals within those organizations as well. And the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act has kind of the 7 wellbeing objectives, and these have the way that we have developed, particularly the Social Partnership Act, but equally with the UK Government Procurement Act, and the way we've input to that as well. We've really tried to focus our efforts on making sure that we are able to align with and support the delivery of wellbeing objectives through our procurement activity. Procurement is, as I said earlier, it is for me, it's the most important part of any organisation, and it can really help us to achieve some of these important wellbeing objectives. And if we just think about, for example, the kind of the Wales of cohesive communities, for me, the way procurement can help us to kind of really deliver that objective is about how we engage with our stakeholders, how we engage with our communities, how we understand some of the challenges that those communities face, and understand really how we can engage with the communities to help us deal with those and address some of those challenges, and come up with new ideas and different ways of delivering kind of services that will maximize the impact that we're able to have. So there's a real kind of focus on the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act through the approach to procurement. But similarly, kind of with the 7 wellbeing goals, Wellbeing of Future Generations Act also includes something called the 5 ways of working. And again, through kind of adopting this 5 ways of working, we can really start to deliver much greater, much more sustainable impact for our communities. And if we just take some of these ways
Well,
of
we've
working,
lost
for
you
example,
again.
long
Oh,
term.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
What it is, this is kind of being in Bangor up in North Wales. Someone must have forgotten to put 50p in the meter, so I can only apologise for that. So if we think about kind of long term, it's about making sure that we aren't just thinking as a contracting authority, as a procuring body, what is it that we need now? It's about thinking, what do we need now, but then how can we prepare for the future? How can we take into account potential future changes that we expect in how we design and deliver these services? How can we involve stakeholders? How can we involve communities? How can we involve social businesses, the voluntary sector, the third sector in our decision making, in the design of these services, with a view to preventing future problems? And so again, the kind of the drive for me, the kind of the drive in procurement isn't about necessarily changing the procurement process. For me, it's more about changing the way that people approach procurement. And I always remember, I led a procurement team in a housing association up in North Wales, and we had a new director join. And I remember kind of introducing myself to her as the procurement manager, and her first words to me were, "All right, so you're the person that's going to say no to me all the time," because there's this misperception that procurement is there to stop things from happening. It's a blocker. But actually, as I said earlier, good procurement, effective procurement can really help an organization to achieve its strategic aims, and can really kind of, help to deliver that long-term sustainable kind of impact, positive impact for our communities. And so in terms of some of the kind of the whys in relation to kind of the procurement reform process, and again, without kind of, this is a very quick whistle stop tour of reform in Wales, but some of the kind of the key, this is just some of the kind of the key reasons really that we're looking to kind of embark on this journey. And I guess for this forum, maybe some of the kind of the more important ones are kind of the middle three, around kind of, we expect these changes to be better for suppliers. It's going to deliver much more kind of social value for many, and there's going to be more focus on well-being goals. And in terms of how these changes are going to make it better for suppliers, it kind of links to the point on the far left around greater transparency. At the moment, for some of the kind of the smaller contracts, the lower value contracts that the Welsh public sector as a whole awards, without meaning to sound disrespectful, it's a little bit like the Wild West out there, where things are done and they just happen, and there's no visibility of the spend. There are lots and lots of kind of, lowish value contracts that are awarded to suppliers. Suppliers are great at delivering the contracts, but kind of, as a, as a as a marketplace and as a supply side, there's no visibility really of what contracting authorities are spending. But equally, there's an argument to say that from a contracting authority perspective as well, there's no real visibility of kind of, what we're spending and where we're spending it. So actually, by improving our understanding of what we're spending, who we're spending it with, and being able to develop that forward look of what we think, that long-term look of what we think we're going to need in the future. Actually, that's going to make it much better for suppliers, and in particular for kind of social businesses and kind of, the voluntary sector, to see and to identify opportunities to actually get involved in public procurement, and to identify, potential opportunities for collaboration, and for delivering kind of, innovative services and solutions to public sector organisations, which then is going to help to deliver that kind of more holistic value for money. And when we talk about value for money in the context of these changes, I think it's really important to establish that we're not talking about kind of, value for money. Value for money doesn't equate to cost savings. It isn't just about saving money. Value for money in this context is very much linked to economic, social, environmental, and cultural well-being. And so actually, value for money is about how not only do we ensure that we're kind of, delivering things a kind of, an acceptable and reasonable price, but also how we maximizing the benefit from that spend to deliver, our net zero aspirations, or to deliver community well-being, and all of those other kinds of things, and how we, maximizing social value and well-being impacts, which then links to that focus on well-being goals through the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So we're very, very confident that changing people's perceptions of procurement and using this legislative reform to change the way that people in organisations see procurement is really going to help to deliver much broader, much more long-term benefits. And as I mentioned earlier, that socially responsible procurement duty that comes from the Social Partnership Act, it applies to all of an organisation's procurement activity, not just those higher value ones. And again, it links back to changing the way that people think about procurement. So it is an end-to-end duty, which again, if you link it back to the Procurement Act, it's not just about the process of buying a thing. It's all of the brilliant stuff that we need to do beforehand to determine, what outcomes, what impacts we're looking to achieve, and also kind of at the contract management stage, how we manage those risks. But this socially responsible procurement duty is really driving us to do that throughout the procurement process, and really driving us to consider how we improve the economic, social, environmental, and cultural well-being of our areas, and how we do that by engaging with social businesses, with SMEs, with the voluntary sector, with the third sector, with charities. It's not just about trying to focus on the larger contracting or the larger suppliers. These changes are really aimed to deliver benefits for SMEs and VCSEs as well. And so just to kind of finish really with some things that I think as social businesses you could be looking at, or you should be considering kind of at this stage. I've given you a really kind of quick whistle-stop tour of the changes that are being introduced. And if I'm totally honest, I'm conscious that I've spoke very, very quickly, and I think I've really probably scratched the surface. And if I'm totally honest with you, I probably haven't even made a dent in the bonnet of that scratch, to be honest. There is, procurement reform is really important, and there's so much opportunity there. For me, the fact that I'm here and I'm able to at least bring this to your attention is is brilliant, because now at least you know that this is happening. You know that the way that contracting authorities in Wales and kind of, you know, across the board in England will be procuring, you know that there are going to be things changing. So that's great, because, you know, if nothing else, at least you now have this little bit of knowledge that you can take away and kind of do what you will with it. In terms of how I think you should prepare for these legislative changes coming into force, you know, I've suggested some kind of, you know, things on the slide. The new regime, and it was remiss of me to say, the new regime is anticipated to come into force at the end of October this year. So the Procurement Act, although it is legislation at the moment, it isn't in force, but the coming into force date is the 28th of October. And then the social partnership, the socially responsible procurement duties in the Social Partnership Act will come into force at some point in 2025. Okay, so what we're in now is a little bit of a transition period, both as a kind of, you know, a procurement side, a procuring side, but also as a supply side as well. You know, the first bullet point there is make sure that you're fully briefed on the forthcoming changes. For a lot of you, I assume that this will probably be the first time that you've heard of these pieces of legislation, or you've been made aware that kind of these things are changing. There are so many resources out there. There is, you know, a plethora of kind of, you know, legal blogs and kind of, you know, guidance documents and all of these things that will help, you know, both, you know, you as suppliers and the buying side as well, to understand kind of what these changes are and how they will affect you. So I'd really encourage you to kind of have a look at, you know, what resources are available. There is going to be a new central, called a central digital platform, which all kind of contract opportunities will be published on, and again we'll be able to provide you with further detail on that as and when it becomes available. But one of the things that I would really encourage you to do is to, you know, if you haven't already, sign up to Sell to Wales, which is the Welsh digital platform, and then when it becomes available, sign up to the UK Government Central Digital Platform as well. There is going to be much greater focus for contracting authorities to publish something called a pipeline. So this is their future pipeline of opportunities that they have, and you'll be able to use that to potentially identify opportunities to get involved in public sector procurement, identify, you know, what kind of contracts might be coming up over the next kind of year or so that, you know, you think you'd be best placed to deliver, and then you can kind of, you know, start to resource accordingly to make sure that when that opportunity does come up, you're able to bid for the work, you know, in good time. And then as part of that kind of that process of thinking about how you bid for it, one of the things I'd really encourage you to do is start thinking about kind of, you know, what, you know, as an organization, kind of what qualities do you have to kind of to bring to the table? You know, what is your things like, you know, measuring your kind of your social impact, you know, thinking about some of the kind of the contracts that you may have delivered in the past, and some of the kind of the you know, the outcomes that you've achieved, and in particular kind of, you know, the approach that you've taken to work with stakeholders and work with contracting authorities. You know, I think there's a lot to be said about the kind of almost like the approach and the relationship between yourselves and the contracting authorities, and how that's been used to maximise the kind of the outcomes and the outputs that you've achieved. And then similarly, you know, that then links to how your organisation can support national and local priorities. Like I say, that's a really quick whistle-stop tour of the kind of the reforms and the changes that are coming into force. This is the email address for my team, and I'll share the slides with Elizabeth after the session so that she can send them out to you. But if there is anything, you know, I'm happy to take questions now if we have the time. But if, you know, following this session you do have any questions, you know, please feel free to reach out to me. You know, my job and my team's job, we exist to kind of preach the procurement reform gospel in Wales, and to make sure that, you know, people are aware that it's happening, which, you know, hopefully now that you're aware, but also to really make sure that you know how you can get involved, and how in the future your best place to be able to benefit from the many opportunities that these changes are going to bring. So thank you very much for your time, and like I say, time permitting, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Carl. That's great. There is a question. I can see one so far from Sinead. I don't know if you can see that in the chat, but
Yeah.
she's asking about the supplier sites, saying that they are on Sell to Wales, but are there any others? Sell to Wales has
Um,
a lot of large contracts which are kind of too big for them to handle, and maybe
yeah.
small is a good way in for lots of organisations if they've not done this kind of work before.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really good point, because at the moment there is a legal obligation for contracting authorities to only they have to publish contracts above what are called the GPA thresholds, which are 200 and something thousand for goods and services and 5 point something million for works. So it does really kind of focus on the large ones. But again, thinking back to some of the things I said, these changes that are being introduced through procurement reform will mean that a lot of the lower value contracts will now start to be advertised on Sell to Wales. Sell to Wales is going to continue to be our Welsh digital platform for the Welsh public sector. So if you're already registered on Sell to Wales, then I think that's a really great place to start. The other one, as I mentioned on the slides, that I would really encourage you to look at once it's available, is the UK government central digital platform, because again, that's going to have the details of the contract opportunities from across the border in England and kind of the rest of the UK as well.
So
So if I were to kind of highlight that, those two would be the main ones, I would say.
So the UK one won't replace Sell to Wales.
The UK government won't replace Sell to Wales. So what there will be is a central digital platform, which is administered by the UK government. But in Wales, we will have a Welsh digital platform in the form of Sell to Wales. But that Welsh digital platform will link and feed into the central digital platform as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. There are more questions. That's fantastic. Thank you all for asking your questions. So, there was one before from Pip. What changes? I'm sorry, I can't see it. What changes do you expect to see in terms of types of organisations winning contracts? How will public bodies be monitored on how they are implementing the Act? Oh, good question.
Okay, so in terms of changes I expect to see in terms of the types of organisations winning contracts, my hope is that we're gonna see a lot more kind of diversity now in the types of organizations that are winning contracts, because at the moment, and as Sean had said in her, or alludes to in her question, Sal to Wales at the moment only really focuses on those bigger contracts. So really, we can only with confidence say which organizations are being awarded those bigger contracts. And as Sean quite rightly points out, a lot of those are more kind of big contracts geared towards bigger organizations. But I think if we're able to improve the visibility of and the availability actually of some of those smaller contracts as well, I think what we'll see is there's going to be much more diversity in kind of where the types of organizations that are winning those contracts. And again, that it does really go back to changing people's behaviors in organizations, because without sounding or with the risk of sounding awful, there is people are comfortable in awarding contracts to suppliers that they've already used in the past, and actually that might be appropriate sometimes, but it misses an opportunity to do things differently and to do more. And so hopefully by changing people's behaviors, we'll be able to engage with more suppliers as part of the procurement process.
Okay.
And how will they be monitored on how they're implementing the Act? So one of the things that we are currently considering to cover the three pieces of legislation is oversight. Is the development of an oversight function or an oversight unit, which will then look proactively at how contracting authorities are procuring contracts for goods, services, and works, which goes without saying. Then is about how they implement the act.
Okay, thank you for that. So a couple more questions here.
Yep.
If you can briefly answer them before we move on to
Yep.
Merthyr Tydfil. But so Ian's got a really good question about the percentage of the social aspect, where he's come up against tenders which are 90% price alone and
Yep.
small percentage social value. If you are able to answer that. And Andrea has asked about how can they be represented at PSB level, so public service body level, to know what's being discussed by NHS or education and be part of the discussion. Maybe that's about being, proactive and going forward, trying to engage with these bodies. But have you got any sort of brief answers to those?
Yeah, so I mean, if I take Andrew's question first and then go back to Ian. So in terms of kind of how the smaller organisations can be represented, again, I think a lot of the kind of the reform, what we're trying to drive is kind of behavioural change. We want people to really think much more proactively about how we can engage with smaller organisations. And actually, there is a specific duty in the Procurement Act to consider. For contracting authorities to proactively consider the barriers that SMEs face and smaller organisations face when accessing public procurement opportunities, and think about how those barriers can be reduced or removed. So I think if we're able to kind of, change that mindset, what that's going to do is that is going to open up much more opportunity to have those conversations with contracting authorities and with the kind of the PSBs as well, which will then help to understand what opportunities are coming up in the future. So hopefully that kind of addresses that question. And then the reason I've come to Ian's questions last is because he's kind of touched on a really, really good and important point. And if I'm honest with you, it's something which really, really annoys me, because he's absolutely right. There is still far too many contracts that are being awarded on the basis of price only, or where prices are a really high kind of percentage of the thing. And I think that's in some instances it's appropriate, but in a lot of cases where it's used, it isn't, and it misses an opportunity to really focus on some of those social, environmental and cultural benefits that can be delivered through procurement. So again, in the Procurement Act, one of the main changes is that rather than going awarding contracts on the basis of something called the most economically advantageous tender, contracts are now being awarded on the basis of the most advantageous tender. And it's semantics, and when this kind of was first introduced, I thought, well, all we're doing is we're taking one word out of the description, and because we can already award contracts on the basis of price and quality. But actually thinking about it in a bit more detail, what it does is it provides contracting authorities with the opportunity to remove price out of the equation altogether. So where it's appropriate, contracting authorities could really, really heavily weight, they could go on 100% quality, which would include, 25, 30, 35% on kind of, social value, social elements, those kinds of things. So again, for me, it's about, that changing our approach, changing our mindsets, changing our behaviours, to really drive home the fact that procurement and value for money isn't just about price, it isn't just about cost savings. It's about the impact that we're looking to achieve, the outcomes that we're looking to deliver. And that starts right at the very beginning of the procurement process, where we've identified the need, and then we start thinking about, what's important in the delivery of that contract. How can we achieve those outcomes, and how can we use that then to influence the evaluation criteria, so that there is an appropriate focus on things like the social aspect or the environmental aspect. Specifically for the question, is there a breakdown of how much of the bid will be based on the social aspect? No. That is going to be very much kind of case dependent. But my real hope is that actually we will start to see, and we are starting to see, a lot more focus on that non-price element of the evaluation.
Great. Thanks so much, Carl. Okay, there is another question, but I think we need to move on now. So if we've got time, we'll come back at the end, if that's okay. Thank you so much. So now I'm really happy to hand over to Richard from Merthyr Tydfil Institute for the Blind, and I think Petra's with him. So I think they're still here somewhere. And apologies to anyone who couldn't see all of the presentation because of the camera layout. I was having a few issues with that. Sorry. Hope that's okay for you now. So are you okay there, Richard?
Hi, morning everyone.
Right. I just
Everything
need to
okay?
try and unpin Carl's video. Sorry, I don't know what's happened here. So I'll try and make and pin you instead. That seemed to be what was the problem before. Okay, that's better. Thank you. Right, thank you very much. So if you want to share your screen, Richard, and introduce your work, and that would be fantastic. Thank you.
I'm going to try the slideshow. See if does it come up as a slideshow now?
I think we can see like most of the presentation screen, but it doesn't look like slideshow as before.
Okay.
But that's fine, honestly, Richard. Thank you so much. So Richard's the CEO of Merthyr Tydfil Institute for the Blind, and we're really grateful for your help today because we know you've been working in this space before, and we really appreciate your input.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Hi everyone, my name is Richard Welford, Chief Executive of Merthyr Institute for the Blind. This is my colleague Petra Kennedy, she's Deputy CEO. I just want to give you a quick overview of MTIB and what we're doing and what our experience is of this public sector procurement. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of history about MTIB, some of our products and customers, how we've interacted with the public sector business, and what the pros and cons are with some of the activities that have been involved in. MTIB has been supporting people with disabilities and health conditions, believe it or not, for over 100 years. So we've been going since 1923, Pithead collections that started off for the welfare of the blind in the area, and we've just expanded from there. So there's our new unit that we've had since in the last 15 years, which was funded by Objective One funding. And there's just a couple of photos of some of our staff and some of the equipment. So just to give you an idea, we're a limited company by guarantee. We're a charity, we're a supported business and a social enterprise. We focus on supporting disabled and disadvantaged people to move closer into employment. So we currently have about 55 staff. In fact, by next Monday, we'll have another 3 on board with us, and 80% of at least 80% have a disability or health condition.
Not just blind.
We're not just blind and partially sighted people. There's about 20% of the people are blind and partially sighted. The remainder have other disabilities and health conditions. We have 2 parts to the business. It operates a commercial woodworking manufacturing unit and an employment and training department. So the manufacturing unit makes products, which I'll show you in a minute, and the employment and training, which we won't be talking too much about today, is all about delivering employment and training contracts for central, local, regional governments. So currently we're delivering a UK SBF contract and a Restart, which is the main DWP contract. Okay, some of our products. So we got 2 main areas at the moment. One is the business to business, which is wooden frames. It's our core business, wooden frames and components of the office furniture and furniture industries. Some of the customers that we have, you may know some of those: Beeper, Orange Box, Ashwood, Recliners, the Sofa Group, Oak Tree Mobility. So Oak Tree Mobility, Bush Mobility, all those 2 are recliner frames. We do a lot of recliner frames for the health market. And the retail sector there. Space Oasis is another educational furniture manufacturer, and Able Office, who are a local manufacturer for both educational and office furniture. So that's the business to business, our core business of making wooden frames for the furniture industries. And then we have a business to customer relationship, which we've been up until recently developing in collaboration with another organization. But that organization ceased trading, and we've taken up some of their opportunities with them. So we're delivering office furniture solutions in offering remanufactured and new office furniture designs, layouts, and installation. This is something which we've been dabbling in for the last sort of 4 or 5 years, but now we're becoming to the forefront and actually linking with the customer directly. So we're learning how to market ourselves because we didn't have a front end function as such to customers. So on the public sector side, we have contracts I say contracts, we're having projects at the moment with RCT, and we quickly took over a project which has become available, performed very well, and they've taken the opportunity to offer us more projects. So that's ongoing at the moment. We've delivered about 200 seats, as we call it, for staff in one of their refurbished offices, and we've got probably another 200 to do this year at some stage. Carmarthenshire County Council also, they have, through their procurement route, they have designated MTIB as the office furniture provider throughout the county. So anything that comes, requirements for office furniture, they come to us first. If we can't deliver it, then they can go out to somewhere else. So that's been very, very positive, and that's almost a day-to-day opportunity. So we're delivering some big prestigious projects. We've got one down in Pentre Owl, which is in Carmarthenshire, and we've delivered a Flying Start scheme refurbishment recently, just after Christmas. And we've done some in the main offices in Carmarthenshire, where the directors' offices have been refurbished. So that is good for us, because we are the named organisation based on our social enterprise, social value credentials, and the fact that we can remanufacture products as well. So the other two there we helped WCVA move to their new unit about 5 or 6 years ago now. And we also did the same for Transport for Wales. Well, the two photographs you got there from the Transport for Wales, some of the products we made there. There's a couple of others here. These were from WCVA in their new offices in Dumbles Road. We also made this product, which was a bespoke product for their get-together area. And these are a couple of offices from Carmarthenshire County Council. And there's one there to give you an idea. There's one there to give you an idea of the Rhondda Cynon Taf, sort of the scale of, that's just one room, that is. So the scale of the products that we're put. So at the moment we're designing what they want. We're remanufacturing from some of their legacy furniture, and then obviously installing it as well. So that's been great. We've actually done very well over the last 6 months on that basis. Quickly go on to public sector business. So currently our sales last year were roughly around 1.1 million on the manufacturing side, and 25 to 30% of that was from the public sector. We've obviously utilisation of Sell to Wales, that's already mentioned, and we bid to get into any specific framework. So I'd really advise people, obviously, make sure you've got a profile on Sell to Wales if you already haven't, and look as far and wide as that can be sort of picked up as far as the opportunities that are on Sell to Wales. So if it's a tenuous link to your type of organisation, still put that code in there into your list, so that you get those notifications as well as the main ones that you would normally expect. So we get opportunities from many other areas which may not be directly office furniture or other types of furniture. We obviously got a link with our employment and training side, so we link that in as well. So we get a plethora of stuff, some which is just not relevant to us, but it's just to be aware that some of those things might be relevant in the future. You need to establish a public sector procurement route. So for your particular activity, whatever you're trying to sell or service or product, you need to understand how the public sector procures it. So if your customer is, say, the local authority, or you think that you would like to deliver something for the local authority, then how do they procure? What are their influences? Who are the people that actually make the decisions? And try to market to them the fact that you're delivering whatever service you can deliver for them, and that you deliver the social value that is now required and incumbent upon them to show within their procurement. As Carl said, this is going to become much more important. But if organisations that are procuring in public sector don't know of you, then there's little chance of you being included into their supply chains. The other element is, I think Carl touched on it before, is that procurers do tend to go with the same routes, do tend to go with the same end procurer or supplier, because they've been tried and tested. And in our sort of third sector social enterprise area, you can be thought of as certainly in the charity sector, it can be thought of, well, they might not be able to deliver at the same value and at the same value and the same quality as their perhaps private sector counterpart. So you've got to try and belay that fear by showing what you have done from previous customers and get some endorsements where you can, so that you can actually prove to them that you can actually deliver what they want. And the biggest thing that I always say to potential customer is, we won't bite off more than we can chew. We've got to give them some sort of comfort that whatever you say and whatever they commit to give to you, that you're going to deliver it, and by hook or by crook, because there will be problems down the road, you've got to deliver it for them, not only for yourself to get potential further work, but also for the sector as a whole, to make sure that they don't think that we won't be able to deliver. Some of the pros and cons then that we've experienced. So it's great that the Welsh Government got the policy, they got the acts in to use social enterprise in public sector supply chains. And that is a great opportunity to build relationships with the various public sector bodies, the procurement reform team, and all those. So I would urge you to do that. But you need to remarket yourself to potential prime contracts for a lot of these contracts. We know that there's a certain level of contracts that actually get put on to sell to Wales. That might increase now with the lower level contracts, but a lot, certainly in our area, a lot of the work goes to prime contractors first. So say a local authority commissioning a new school, they won't be looking to MTIB to deliver the school, but MTIB could be delivering the furniture that's required in the school. So we need to market ourselves initially to the council, the local authority, to say, look, we're here, we can do that, it'll add social value, so that they can guide their prime contractors to say, well, we want to deliver social value, and we believe that this organisation in our community can actually deliver this opportunity. So then you get yourself into, or potentially get yourself into, the supply chain as a subcontractor with the prime contractor. That is the most difficult thing to do because prime contractors, again, once they get the contract from the council or whoever it is, they will go on their merry way. Now, they usually have a social enterprise champion within those businesses, but they have a plethora of other opportunities that they go for the easy pick ones. They cherry pick as a contractor, as a construction contractor, we can, put a playground in a school or something like that, and that would be their social value. And the other problem is that as soon as that contract's delivered, unless you're in that supply chain, it's quite hard to get in and prove that you can be in there. And we're currently doing it with a couple of contractors now, prime contractors, construction contractors, and they might use you for one-off, but it's hard to get them to do it on a regular basis. So the other angle is, obviously, if you are going to be able to get access to contracts which are on sale to Wales and actually bid yourself, there's always going to be a social value section in there now. And we heard earlier on that one of the people on the call said that there was a 90% on price. Well, that does happen. I'm finding now that we can get up to 50% on social value, but most of the time it's about 25%. Now, that sounds great. However, most of the people, most of the bidders into these contracts, or the private sector or prime contractors, they can all write a fantastic social value section because they got people to resource and do that. So in reality, it doesn't matter how good your social value section is. There's likelihood that you're competing with someone else who's got a similar ability or similar way of being able to prove it on paper. And what that means is that ultimately, even if it's 90% social value and 10% on price, if you're both getting the same sort of marks for social value, it still comes down to price, because that's the only one that's actually been monitored here. The other problem is that, and I don't know if Carl's got anything up his sleeve in the duty now, is that once the contract's been given and the social value element has been sort of agreed, it doesn't always get audited. Now, some councils, I know Swansea are actually auditing it to say, well, you said you were going to deliver this. Did you deliver it? And are there any consequences if you haven't delivered it? And I haven't seen anyone being pulled up on that at the moment. So that's the next step, I think, as well, to try and implement in future. The other thing is, right at the bottom there, we've experienced when our projects, I told that, rather than sustainability. So we've actually had contracts where the organisation have used us, applauded us, and then the next contract that's come along, they've used someone else. So I've gone back to what they were doing before. And they only used us because it was a marketing ploy. So you've got to be mindful of that. Well, hopefully that will be eliminated or reduced. And there's still a limited use of frameworks. If there's any frameworks with the activities that you're delivering that's about, understand them and try and get and bid into them, either as a standalone or in a consortium or in a supply chain of a favourable prime contractor. We are in a framework with the National Procurement Service for Wales. It's called something else now, I've forgotten what's. And that's for furniture and for educational furniture. And we were on the reserve contract list. So that allowed organisations to actually say, well, because you're on the reserve contract, you give high value social value, we'll allow that contract to go directly to you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Carmarthenshire are doing that, and to a certain extent, Rhondda and Taff are. But that's very limited in its use at the moment. Mostly you're competing with the private sector organisations, which is then quite challenging because their resources are much higher than yours. I think that's about it from me. Have I gone over? I'm not sure. Any questions that anyone could I can answer or put them on the chat or email me?
That's fantastic, Richard. Thank you. Really, really valuable input there. Let's see if I don't know if anyone's put any questions in. I know some people might have to go because it's just on, I think it's just on 11 now. But if you do have to go, we are recording this. And I'll ask you some questions at the end about if people need more information. But so there's a question from Richard. I don't know if you can see it. Sorry, question from Ian. Richard, what would you say is your most successful strategy for gaining contracts?
The most successful is actually understanding the customer, the end customer. So if you can find a local authority person who's making those decisions, who can influence, and the problem is you've got to do it so early on. So the example I made about the school. So the school pipeline of construction needs to be, you need to know that so far in advance to be able to influence the potential the customer, the end customer, rather, local authority, to see how that works and how they can sort of endorse you as an organisation that their eventual prime contractor would actually look at linking in with you, and they see the value of using you, and then hopefully that would glean a contract. That's the best way. But you've got to understand, because what will happen is that you can go to the local authority and they say, well, what can you do for us? So you've got to understand what you can do for them and to be able to couch it in terms that will be of benefit to them. You've got to be able to know what the social value you're delivering, and to be able to say that this social value is better than the other social value that perhaps someone else is doing. That's the other thing which hasn't been actually done at the moment, is in the social value sections is, what's the higher value of social value than compared to a lower value social value. So is MTIB employing disabled people and we sustain jobs for years and years and years, is that of a higher inherent higher social value than something else that has, that has social value but perhaps not as effective, and that's perhaps not looked at.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
If I can,
Sorry.
sorry, Elizabeth, if I can just come in on that part, I think Rich has got a really, really important point there around kind of the way that social value is measured, because there's real risk in my view that we will tend to try to put a financial value on the social value that's delivered, but actually I think sometimes if we do that, it kind of misses the point of kind of the impact that we're looking to make. And I always try to use the example of, so I live on a terrace of 3 houses, and if there was a contractor delivering building houses across the road, and they were looking to through the contract deliver some social value, the way that I experience that social value will be totally different from kind of my 2 neighbors. For me, it might absolutely change my world. But for my 2 neighbors, it might not make any difference. And for kind of, one of the neighbors, it might actually make things worse for them. So I think we need to really think about, the outcome, the impact that we're looking to have. And like I say, I think sometimes that kind of that tendency to try and, put a financial value on kind of the social value that we're delivering can sometimes be a bit dangerous.
Yeah, I would agree. Oh, sorry. If there's a pause, I'll jump in always. I would agree. It's everyone looks at social value from their own perspective of what they think social value is, and you have to educate people on what social value you're delivering, which they may never have thought about, and how that impacts. Like we have what we tend to do is we do case studies on people and say, look, this person was in this position, didn't have a job, couldn't come to work, was really difficult, and now they're here now, they've got a sustainable job, they're regular in work. This has a knock-on effect to their family. Their families are much more well supported, and we've even helped some of their family, and it's lots of different ways. And that to me, giving someone a job, sustaining that job for a long period of time, which is basically what this business is all about. It's not about cutting up bits of wood for furniture manufacturers. It's about employing disabled people. So, the fact that we're doing it in that way, yeah, it's a hard game, but at the same time, it brings massive inherent social value. So we're lucky in that respect that we can, if people are more can understand that a bit more, because most people you're talking to have got a job and they realize, well, if I didn't have a job, I'd be in a much different space. Whereas perhaps some of the other social enterprises, you have to explain it a bit more of what the value of your business actually brings, to be able to then get them on board and understand it, and for them to value it enough to either give you an opportunity or include you in the supply chains and endorse you to any supply chain or any subcontract arrangement you might have with a prime contractor. Does that help?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. There was another comment in chat just saying thank you for sharing your wisdom there, because it is really valuable to others. Thank you. I don't think there's another question, but just want to say thank you so much for your input, because that was really fantastic, and Carl as well. You articulated perfectly your mission there, and we have in the past done sessions on how to measure your social impact, but also delving into how to articulate that in a way you can share it easily with others. And I'll share the link in the Padlet. If Dave's still here, he can pop maybe the link to the Padlet in again for anyone who missed it before. So that's where we'll put all the information about today's session and the presentations when I've uploaded them. I'll also share this recording on there as well. It just might take me a while to get that up there, but all of your ideas have been really helpful. If you are able to, in the chat, if you could just put, maybe if you feel more confident or interested to look into this area now, if you could either put a thumbs up or just a comment, it'd be really useful for us to know if it's been helpful for you. I know some people have already. And just to share as well, someone mentioned earlier about innovative ways to get in touch with them, commissioners. And one thing that you could consider when you have already started working in this field is there an opportunity to collaborate with other businesses? And we haven't really had chance today to talk about collaboration, but it is one way that you can access some of these bigger contracts. And we have had clients that have come either from independent businesses or they're already existing social enterprises, and they work with other businesses and can form a consortium, basically, which is a type of cooperative to access some of these bigger contracts. So we have done a session on consortia before. If this is something you want to look at again in the future, then again, let me know and we could come back to that. But just to let you all know, it is Cooperatives Fortnight at the moment. So this week and next week. So you might hear a little bit about cooperatives in the news. So it is, a nice opportunity to be able to talk about that a bit more with people who aren't familiar with the concept as well. But I did just want to say again, thank you so much for sharing, your experiences with us today and your time, everybody, all the effort you've put into sharing this with us. And thank you for all the questions, everyone. If anyone wants to stay on now, I know there was a last question from Ruth that I don't think Carl had time to answer, but maybe, I don't know if Ruth's still here. So let me see if I can find it. But thank you again, everybody. What was Ruth's question?
How can we influence the needs of public body? How can we influence how the needs of public bodies are met, and how can we help them be more innovative? That was the question, and again, I think it's a great question. So just really briefly, I think one of the, again, and it goes back to kind of my view on kind of what we're trying to do and achieve through these reforms. What we're looking to really kind of do is change people's mindsets, change people's behaviors, change the culture in a lot of places, a lot of times in contracting authorities, to make them really kind of understand how good procurement can deliver real tangible positive impacts for our communities, and as part of that kind of drive to improve the way that we procure, a lot of the focus is going to be on kind of the pre-procurement planning stage, which includes engaging contracting authorities, engaging with suppliers, engaging with supply chains, thinking about how they can make public sector contracts more accessible for some of the smaller organizations. And actually kind of some of the things that Richard mentioned earlier, I think are really important to come back to here. Talk about how a lot of the times you feel like you keep competing with larger organizations, and some of these organizations will have professional bid writers, and that's absolutely, unfortunately, the case. But then you have to kind of think about some of the great stuff that you guys have to offer. Some of those that real kind of local benefit, that local impact that you're able to have, either as a kind of a tier one contractor, or again, as Richard kind of alluded to earlier, for opportunities to deliver services within that public sector supply chain. Because I think it's really important to consider, it's not just the kind of the opportunity to contract with the public body, that there will be a much larger supply chain, and there will be opportunities there for you to get involved too. And I think it goes back to what Richard was saying about kind of understanding the customer, and I absolutely agree. And I think what will help you to really understand the customer is, again, the way that kind of those customers change the way that they procure. So really making them and helping them to think more proactively about that pre-procurement planning stage, and the importance of engaging with stakeholders, and the importance of engaging with suppliers, and with kind of social businesses and with SMEs at an early stage of that procurement process, to understand what opportunities there are to deliver innovative services, either directly to the public body, or as part of the supply chain. So I think it's not something that's got an easy kind of answer to it. But I think there will be opportunities as we kind of start to embed these changes that we're looking to deliver through procurement reform. You're on mute, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Right. Oh yeah, Dave has just mentioned Business Wales have got some support on registering learning functions of CELT. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And if anyone felt like maybe new entrants wanted a bit more of a session where we just look at CELT Wales and look for opportunities for social enterprise, we could do a session on that as well. So anything in particular you'd like more information on, feel free to pop it in the chat. But otherwise, I will say thank you now and goodbye, because I know some of you have got to go off and do other things, but thanks for all your time today. It's been great.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.